Shalom, bruchim habaim lebeit midrash Malka, shalom, and welcome back to the Queen's Study Hall. This is part 4. You've officially made it to part 4 of my series on Hebrew, the fundamentals of Hebrew language. So congratulations, and also thank you for sticking with me. I'm very glad to have you here. Quick recap of what we did in our previous video. We talked about how in Hebrew there are 5 categories of vowels. That's a, I, u, e, and o. We also talked about how in Hebrew there are multiple different ways of writing each of those vowels, and we covered the most basic and common ways of writing them. Yeah? We also talked about how in Hebrew the vowels generally appear underneath the consonants in a word. They will sometimes appear to the side with a vav, say, if you remember. Occasionally they'll appear on top, but mostly they appear underneath, again, right? So, that brings us to part 4, pronunciation. And this is not just putting the correct emphasis on the correct syllable, as we like to say. It's much more than that in Hebrew, as I hope you will appreciate by the end of this video. So, first of all, I wanted to start out by telling you that there are some words in some letters in Hebrew that it is critical for you to pronounce correctly, for you to differentiate and pronounce correctly. Why? Because you can fundamentally change the meaning of a word if you are a bit lazy in your diction. And I know here in America we tend to be very lazy in our diction because it doesn't have the same dire significance. Like, you're not going to start a war if you don't pronounce the D at the end of the word and, you know. But in Hebrew, it can have much more drastic consequences. So, what do I mean by that? Well, there are 3 letters in particular that a lot of Americans do not pronounce correctly. And, well, you know, a lot of people who are not native Hebrew speakers in general. Sorry, I'm not trying to pick on Americans. Anyway, chet, chaf, of course, because with the dot it would be kaf, so chaf, and hey. Oops, sorry, whoa, glare. Hey. So you'll notice that chet and hey look very, very similar. My students always used to confuse these, and it's understandable. However, I just want to point out a little detail to you that will hopefully give you a way to differentiate them. You see how there's this little opening here on the letter hey? And chet doesn't have that. So you can think of it sort of like a hatch that all the sound escapes out of in the hey. The hey just goes, you know? So, hopefully that's helpful. So, there is, to give you an example, we have the word chika. Let me see if whoa, glare. Gosh. Okay, chika. This means to wait, as in I'm waiting at the bus stop, or I'm waiting for my friend to pick me up. Chika. However, if you mispronounce the chet and it comes out like a hey, you have the word hika, which means to strike, like a blow. So it can mean to strike a physical blow, but it's also used in the sense in a more metaphorical sense. For example, during Pesach, Passover, when we're talking about the 10 plagues, we say that God struck Egypt with the 10 plagues. Hika. It's the same word. And, oh, sorry, by the way, there should be another hey at the end. I don't have multiple flashcards, so just imagine that there is another hey after this kaf. So, call me crazy, but waiting for your friend is not the same thing as, you know, striking them across the face. Moral of the story is, children, please, don't be lazy in your diction, and please don't confuse at least chet and hey. Kaf and hey, a little bit harder to confuse. Anyway, moving right along, there is a cool, at least what I think is cool, detail about how Hebrew is pronounced that I wanted to share with you too in this video. Because as you travel throughout the Jewish world, you will notice that Hebrew is not pronounced the same way, depending on where you are. Some of you may have guessed this already if you remember back in one of my previous videos that when I talked about how Yemenite Jews or Jews from other Arabic-speaking countries will actually vocalize the consonants of Aleph and Ain, whereas for the rest of us Hebrew speakers, they're normally silent. So that's, we're going to come back to that in just a second. You should know that in general, it's a very generalized statement, but of course we're speaking in generalities because I'm trying to keep this video short. In general, there is the Ashkenazi way of pronouncing Hebrew, and there is the Sfaradi, or the Sephardic, Ashkenazi Sephardic way of pronouncing Hebrew. So, for example, I'm going to give you an example of how someone might say it who's from Crown Heights, say, because I lived there for 4 years. Crown Heights is an area of Brooklyn, for those of you who are unfamiliar, that has a lot of Orthodox Jews in it. In particular, Orthodox Jews who are from a certain sort of sect, I guess you could say, called Chabad. And as to what that is a different story, which we don't need to get into. I think they're really cool. Some people might not agree with me. Anyway, so a Chabad person would, let's take the phrase Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. It's a phrase that we use a lot. You see it all over the prayer book. It's the standard opening phrase for when we say beracha, or a blessing. Blessed are you, God, ruler of the universe. You know, a lot of you have probably heard that phrase before. So anyway, I say, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. Whereas, one of my Chabad friends from Crown Heights, they would say something more like, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. So again, I would say, Baruch Atah Adonai. They would say, Baruch Atah Adonai, and I would say Eloheinu Melech HaOlam, and they would say Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. And if you did grow up with this like super authentic Ashkenazi pronunciation, forgive me, I did not. You can probably tell because it doesn't sound as natural on my tongue. My best imitation. So anyway, hopefully that doesn't offend you too much. So we have, hopefully you can hear that there are some very distinct differences in the way that I pronounce it as opposed to the way my friend Shloimi from Crown Heights pronounces it. I'll give you some more examples. So we have the word berachot, for example. Which is like beracha, that's one blessing. Berachot, that's the plural, many blessings. So I would say berachot, of course. My Ashkenazi friend would say brachos. Another example, the words shevet achim, as in like the song Hine matov umanaim shevet achim gam yachad, yeah? I say shevet achim. Shloimi says sheves achim. So I think you can sort of get a better idea of how that works. One of the peculiarities of this very like old style Ashkenazi Hebrew pronunciation is that the ah vowels are a little bit darker, and the tav, which, where is it? Where are you, tav? So this is what tav looks like. Tav changes to an S sound. Normally, tav makes a t, like a T sound. However, in old school Ashkenazi pronunciation, tav will change from a T to an S sound. So that's how you get sheves achim. Yeah? One final example, because it pertains directly to the title of my channel. I say Beit Midrash. Shloimi says Beis Midrash. Hopefully that makes it clear. Yeah? So the Hebrew that I speak is actually what most Israelis in the modern state of Israel speak. that is a general Sephardic way of speaking Hebrew. Going back to what I said about Yemenite Jews and Jews from other Arabic-speaking countries, that is a type of Sephardic pronunciation. And I wish I could demonstrate it for you. I can't, because it would be even worse than my Ashkenaz. Trust me. So, but it just, like, if you can picture the way Arabic sounds, it sounds a lot like that, and it's beautiful. And again, a Yemenite Jew, for instance, would enunciate the Ain and the Aleph, instead of just leaving them silent like I do, and a lot of Israelis do. So, one could say that Hebrew in the Sephardic world, the way it's pronounced, has changed less. Not that it hasn't changed, but that it's changed less over the decades than the way that Hebrew in the Ashkenazi world is pronounced. Why is that? Well, we'll get to that in just a second. Before we move on, I did want to just stick in a little side note, because this is one of my pet peeves. You're learning, like, all of my pet peeves in this video series, so bear with me. American Hebrew is its own beast. And so when I say American Hebrew, I am talking about the Hebrew that is spoken in the liberal Jewish world in America. So it's its own beast because it is highly influenced by American English. And it's incorrect. I know some people would argue with me, some people would be upset by me saying that, but it's incorrect. Because it's influenced by American English, which the sounds of American English have nothing to do with the sounds of Hebrew, and therefore it's incorrect by virtue of the nature of the language. So, if you're looking for guidance on how to pronounce Hebrew, listen to Israelis, you can go to Crown Heights, you can learn from the Jews there. That's a very old, traditional Ashkenazi way of pronouncing it, as I said. Just don't listen to the standard American Hebrew. It's whatever. Now I'm going to step off my soapbox. So, this difference in pronunciation, to really understand where that comes from, we need a quick history lesson. Very quick. Jews originally started out, we came from the Middle East, right? However, post-destruction of the First Temple, there was a pretty sizable population of diaspora Jews in Babylon, which is, of course, modern-day Iraq, right? So, for either economic reasons or reasons of persecution, Jews migrated west and eventually made it into what is modern-day Germany. So, two important things happened when they came to what is modern-day Germany. We have suddenly the birth of Yiddish, which is, of course, a dialect of German, meaning that it is kind of an old form of German, but still German, with some Hebrew words sprinkled in. And if you speak German like I do, you can understand a lot of Yiddish. So, that also gave rise to this sort of, this different way of pronouncing Hebrew. Like I mentioned, like the A vowels are a little bit darker. Our friend Tav changes to an S sound. And interestingly enough, in the Sephardic world, we do have an equivalent of Yiddish, which is, of course, Ladino. And that is what is an old form, it's like a medieval form, I believe, of Castilian Spanish with some Hebrew words sprinkled in. Unfortunately, not a language that I speak either, but I do aspire to learn. I mean, I figure I'm halfway there, because I speak Spanish, so, maybe? So a lot of scholars have argued, and I think it's a pretty reasonable theory to postulate, that the Jews that stayed in the Middle East, and I'll remind you that there were actually a lot of Jews that stayed in Israel, actually, the region of modern-day Israel, that stayed there. Even so, when people came back post-destruction of the First Temple with the Edict of Cyrus, there were Jews living in Israel, again, yay, And then, but even throughout all of the upheavals in history, leading up to the founding of the modern state of Israel in 1948, there have always been Jews there. There's always been a Jewish presence. So it is arguable that, for that reason, that the Sephardic pronunciation of Hebrew has changed less than the Ashkenazi pronunciation. In addition to that, the popular theory is that Yemenite Jews, actually, in particular, retain the most authentic pronunciation of biblical Hebrew, because it's a tradition that's been very carefully preserved and handed down generation to generation. Then again, if someone else out there watching this video knows more than I do, I would love to hear from you. Always excited to learn about these things. So anyway, that is your short window into the differences in pronunciation in Hebrew. It's a fascinating subject, and obviously I think so, otherwise I wouldn't be doing a YouTube video on it. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in. If you like my content, if you like the channel, please like, please subscribe, please share it, tell everyone, and feel free to leave me a comment, drop me an email. My email you should be able to find in the bottom of the description section. I would really love to hear from you. And we'll see you next time here on Beit Midrash Malka. Litraot.